The amber crown spire did not float so much as it presided. Suspended in the upper atmosphere of Cindervale 3,000 feet above the bruised violet clouds of the planet's surface, the structure was a needle of gold and glass piercing the heavens. It was a monument to the Foxkin ascendancy, a testament to a civilization that preferred to look down upon the world rather than inhabit it. Up here, the air was scrubbed clean of the planet's industrial grit, recycled through filters that cost more than a terrestrial city, and scented with a synthetic approximation of jasmine and ozone. It was a beautiful place to suffocate. For Rowan Hale, the spire was simply a grid of surfaces that required constant sanitation. Rowan pushed his industrial polisher down the corridor of ascending light. The machine hummed a low, monotonous B-flat, a sound Rowan had come to appreciate because it drowned out the whispers of the court. It was 2 a.m, the dead hour, the time when the star courts were supposedly asleep, though in a palace built on intrigue sleep was often just a rumor. He paused to wipe a smudge from a gilded railing. He did not look up at the vaulted ceiling, which was a transparent dome revealing the starfield. He did not look at the tapestries depicting the Empress Calith's ancestors descending from the moons. He looked at the smudge. It was a fingerprint. Greasy. Humans. Likely from a technician who had forgotten their place and leaned against the architecture. Rowan sighed, pulling a microfiber cloth from his belt. He rubbed the gold until his own distorted reflection stared back. He looked tired. He always looked tired. At 34, his face was a map of sharp angles and shadowed hollows topped with hair the color of steel wool that he kept ruthlessly short. He had the hands of a mechanic scarred stained permanently around the nail beds and steady as bedrock. Invisible, he muttered to the reflection. Be the ghost Rowan. Just the ghost. He was human, which in the amber crown spire meant he was technically part of the furniture. The Foxkin nobility with their russet hair, amber eyes, and chemically perfected elegance barely registered the existence of the maintenance staff. To them, the floors cleaned themselves, the lights replaced their own filaments, and the air purified itself through divine will. That blindness was Rowan's shield. It was how a man who used to decrypt data fragments from dead civilizations for the System Forensics Division now spent his nights buffing floors. He had walked away from that life, from the politics that turned curiosity into a weapon, and found solace in the simple binary nature of dirt. Dirt was either there or it was gone. Politics was never that clean. The comms unit in his ear crackled. "Hail!" The voice of the shift supervisor, a human named Miller, buzzed. "Sensor trip in the Royal Nursery. Heating fluctuation. Again. Go kick the regulator." Rowan tapped his ear. "Copy that. Kicking the regulator. My specialty." "Don't get smart, Hale. Just fix it before the nannybots log a complaint. If the temperature drops by 2 degrees, the Empress takes it personally." "On my way." Rowan turned the polisher off, leaving it tucked in a service alcove. He picked up his toolkit, a heavy canvas bag that clanked reassuringly against his thigh, and headed toward the lift. The Royal Nursery was located in the West Wing, the most secure sector of the spire. It was built directly over the central axis of the floating city, ostensibly to keep the royal air in the most stable gravity well. As Rowan navigated the silent halls, his boots made no sound. He had modified the soles himself. Silence was survival. He passed 2 Foxkin guards, standing statue still at the sector entrance. They wore ceremonial armor of woven ceramic and silk. They did not look at him. He flashed his clearance badge at the sensor. The light turned green, and he slipped through. The nursery was not a room designed for children. It was a cathedral. The ceiling soared 50 feet high, lost in shadows. The walls were lined with shelves displaying toys that looked too expensive to touch silver rattles. Jade figurines, dolls, with eyes made of sapphires. In the center of the room stood the royal cradle, a floating pod of anti-gravity mesh and white velvet. It was empty. Rowan frowned. He checked the environmental readout on his handheld scanner. The ambient temperature in the room was 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect. Yet the sensor Miller had mentioned was screaming about a heat spike. He walked deeper into the room, his eyes scanning the floor. The carpet here was thick, a lush, crimson weave that felt like walking on moss, but it stopped 10 feet from the far wall, revealing the original foundation of the spire, sleek, dark gray composite stone, engraved with faint, geometric lines. He felt it before he saw it. The heat. Not the dry blast of a heater vent, but a radiant physical warmth rising through the soles of his boots. It felt organic, like standing on the flank of a sleeping beast. "Weird," Rowan whispered. He followed the heat. It led him away from the cradle toward the bare stone section near the heavy, majestic window that looked out over the storm-tossed clouds below. And there, curled up on the hard, unyielding floor, was the princess, Seren Viren. The court whispered about her. The weakest child. The glass princess. She was the empress's youngest, and unlike her robust, predatory siblings, who existed in the court, Seren was rarely seen. Rumor said she could barely walk the length of the promenade without fainting. Rumor said she was a genetic dead end, a failure of the royal bloodline. She looked small. She was 18, perhaps 19, but curled in a ball on the stone, she looked like a child. Her hair was a pale, washed-out strawberry blonde, spilling over the gray floor like spilled wine. She wore a simple nightgown of white silk, thin and shivering, yet she wasn't on the soft carpet. She wasn't in the floating cradle. She was pressing her cheek against the cold stone, her hands clutching the edge of the carpet, as if she were hanging off a cliff in a dream. Rowan froze. Protocol dictated he should leave immediately. A human male alone with a sleeping princess was a death sentence waiting for a signature. But the heat was intensifying. He could feel it radiating up his shins. He took a step closer. The air above the floor shimmered slightly, like heat haze on a tarmac. Seren twitched in her sleep. Her brow was furrowed, her lips moving in a silent, frantic rhythm. She looked exhausted. Not the exhaustion of sleep, but the exhaustion of endurance. Rowan knelt. He kept a respectful distance 3 feet away, but he needed to find the source of the heat. If an induction coil was melting down beneath the floor, the stone could shatter. It could hurt her. He pulled a thermal probe from his bag. The tip glowed red instantly. 104 degrees, and rising. "Great," Rowan muttered to himself, his voice a dry rasp in the silence. "The floor is sick again." He shifted his weight, trying to see the engravings on the stone beneath her arm. They weren't decorative. He narrowed his eyes. The geometry was familiar. It wasn't a Foxkin design which favored curves and organic flows. This was angular, binary, old. It reminded him of the data tombs he used to crack open in the lower quadrants of the dead cities. He reached out with his multi-tool. He didn't intend to touch her, never that, but he needed to tap the groove in the stone just inches from her elbow to check for a vibration resonance. The moment the metal tip of his tool brushed the groove, the world tilted. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure. A thrum that bypassed his ears and vibrated directly in his teeth. The groove in the floor flared with light. Not the harsh white of electricity, but a deep, molten amber. The light raced through the geometric lines, expanding outward from Rowan's tool shooting under Seren's body. She gasped. It was a terrible wet sound, like someone surfacing from deep water. Seren's eyes snapped open. They were wide, pupil-blown, terrified. She didn't scream. She scrambled. She launched herself upright, scrambling backward on the floor, but in her panic her hand lashed out and seized Rowan's wrist. Her grip was shocking. It wasn't the weak, trembling grasp of an invalid. It was iron. It was desperate. "Don't!" she hissed. Her voice was hoarse. "Don't let it close." Rowan froze, his arm locked in her grip. He stared at her. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the floor, at the light that was now pulsing in time with a heartbeat, a slow, thunderous rhythm that seemed to come from miles beneath them. Then she looked up, and their eyes met. Rowan expected to see royal haughtiness. He expected disgust at a human touching her. Instead, he saw raw, unadulterated terror. And something else. Recognition, you, she breathed, staring at his maintenance uniform. You made it stop. I didn't do anything, Your Highness, Rowan said, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline spiking in his blood. I was just checking the thermal load. You should let go of my arm. She looked at her hand on his wrist, as if it belonged to someone else. But she didn't let go. She squeezed tighter, her nails digging into the tough fabric of his sleeve. If you stop, the noise comes back. Please. Weet whoop. Weet whoop. The silent alarm shattered the atmosphere. The red emergency lights bathed the room in the color of blood. Rowan cursed under his breath. That's the perimeter breach. They'll come, Seren whispered. She looked frantic now. The light in the floor began to fade, the amber glow, retreating back into the stone, as if sensing the intrusion. As the light died, Seren slumped, the unnatural strength leaving her hands. She fell forward. Rowan caught her. He didn't think. He just reacted. He caught the princess of the amber-crowned spire by the shoulders before she could hit the stone. And that was exactly how the head of palace security found them. The double doors burst open. Step away from her! The command was a physical blow. Bex Rourke was a wall of muscle and tactical armor. A foxkin of the warrior caste, she moved with a speed that blurred the eye. Before Rowan could even process the order, he was yanked backward by his collar and thrown onto the expensive carpet. He rolled, coming up on one knee, hands raised empty. Maintenance! I'm maintenance! Bex stood between him and Seren, her hand hovering over the shock baton at her hip. Her tail, a thick brush of russet fur, was bristled in agitation. On the floor, human. Face down. Seren was pushing herself up, trembling. Bex, wait! He touched you, Highness, Bex snarled, though her eyes were scanning the room for other threats. Did he hurt you? Did he use a weapon? No, Seren coughed, holding her chest. He caught me. He's a janitor, Bex, Rowan said, keeping his voice low and calm. Check the logs. Heat sensor malfunction. I was dispatched. Bex glared at him, her golden eyes slits of suspicion. She looked at the floor, then at the girl, then at the man. The tableau didn't make sense. A political assassination didn't usually involve a floor buffer and a hug. What is the meaning of this? The new voice was soft, silken, and carried more weight than Bex's shout. Chancellor Morrow Sable glided into the room. If the spire was a machine, Morrow was the grease. He was tall, painfully thin, dressed in robes of midnight blue that seemed to absorb the emergency lighting. His face was handsome in a way that made people uneasy, too symmetrical, too smooth. He wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He didn't look at Bex. He didn't look at the trembling princess. His eyes went instantly hawk-like to the patch of stone floor where the light had been. Rowan saw it. He saw the shift in focus. A nanosecond of intense, hungry calculation before the mask slipped back into place. Chancellor, Bex straightened, snapping a salute. I found this laborer. He had his hands on the princess. Morrow turned his gaze to Rowan. It was like being examined by a reptile. A laborer, Morrow repeated. He stepped closer, his boots clicking softly on the stone. He didn't ask if Seren was hurt. He didn't call for a medic. Who touched the floor? Morrow asked softly. Rowan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He knows, Rowan thought. He doesn't care about the girl. He cares about the mechanism. I did, sir, Rowan lied smoothly. Checking a thermal spike. My equipment might have scratched the finish. I apologize if I set off a pressure sensor. Morrow's smile widened, showing perfectly white teeth. A scratch. And tell me, mister. He glanced at the ID badge on Rowan's chest. Hale, did the floor respond to this scratch? Rowan kept his face blank. The janitor mask. Respond, sir, it's a rock. It just got hot. Probably a subfloor conduit shorting out. Seren made a small sound. Morrow turned to her, his expression shifting instantly to one of cloying, suffocating concern. It was a performance. "Oh, my poor child," Morrow cooed, stepping past Bex to hover over Seren. He didn't touch her. He looked at her as one might look at a valuable vase that had a hairline crack. "You've been sleepwalking again, wandering out of bed. It's the stress of the upcoming Jubilee. I warned the Empress you were too fragile for the festivities." "I wasn't sleepwalking," Seren said, her voice faint. She looked at Rowan, a silent plea in her eyes. "Don't tell him." "Of course not," Morrow said dismissively. "Bex, escort the princess to the medical wing. Quarantine protocol, level 4. "Quarantine?" Bex frowned. "Sir, she just looks tired. I don't think—" "She was in close contact with unsanitary personnel," Morrow said, waving a hand at Rowan as if he were a pile of garbage. "We cannot risk infection. Level 4. Solitary observation. For her own safety." Seren went pale. "No, please. Not the White Room. I just want to stay here." "For your safety, Highness," Morrow repeated, his voice hardening just enough to show the steel beneath the silk. Bex hesitated, then nodded. She helped Seren up. As the princess was led away, she looked back over her shoulder. Her gaze locked onto Rowan's. There was no haughtiness now, only a terrified shared secret. She had felt the floor unlock, and she knew he had felt it too. When the doors closed, leaving Rowan alone with the Chancellor, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Morrow walked a slow circle around Rowan. "Rowan Hale," Morrow mused. "The employment file says you've been with us for 6 months. Impeccable record. Quiet. Efficient. Before that, well, the records are a bit fuzzy. Independent contractor in the Outer Rim." "Just fixing pipes, sir," Rowan said. "Pipes," Morrow echoed. He stopped in front of Rowan. "You seem like a smart man, Mr. Hale. Smart enough to know that what happens in the royal nursery is a matter of state security." Morrow reached into his robe and pulled out a datapad. He tapped the screen and held it out. "Standard non-disclosure agreement. Enhanced penalty clause. It says you saw nothing tonight. You heard nothing. The floor was cold. The princess was in bed. And you were never here." Rowan looked at the pad. "And if I don't sign?" Morrow laughed. It was a dry, breathless sound. "Then we have to wonder why a human was lurking in the dark with a royal heir. The charge is treason. The sentence is an airlock cycled at 30,000 feet without a suit." Rowan took the pad. He pressed his thumb to the screen. "Smart man," Morrow said, taking the pad back. "Now, get out. You are reassigned to Waste Reclamation Level 50. If I see you on the upper tiers again, Hale, I won't bother with the airlock. I'll feed you to the engines." Rowan picked up his bag. "Understood, sir." He walked out. He didn't look back, but he could feel Morrow watching him. And he could feel something else too. A vibration. It was faint, resonating in the bones of his hand, the hand that had held the tool, the hand that had caught the princess. 2 hours later, the skystorm hit. It was an atmospheric event peculiar to Cindervale. The ionic clouds of the lower atmosphere would surge upward, wrapping the spire in a chaotic embrace of violet lightning and screaming winds. The entire floating city went into lockdown. Blast shields slid over the windows. The maglev trains to the surface were grounded. No one in. No one out. Rowan sat in his quarters in the crew barracks. It was a closet compared to the nursery, smelling of recycled air and ozone. He held a cup of synthetic coffee that tasted like burnt copper. On the small view screen on his wall, the public announcement channel was playing on loop. Chancellor Morrow's face was serene and reassuring. "Citizens of the Spire, due to the severity of the storm, the Jubilee preparations are paused. We ask for patience. Additionally, rumors of a security breach in the royal sector are unfounded. Her Highness Princess Seren has entered a period of meditative seclusion to pray for the safety of the spire. Meditative seclusion, Rowan scoffed, taking a sip of the terrible coffee. Level 4 quarantine. He set the cup down. His hand was trembling. He looked at his palm. The vibration was still there. It wasn't fading. If anything, it was getting stronger as the storm raged outside. It was a rhythmic pulse like a code. Short, long, long, short. He knew that rhythm. In his old life, in the life he had buried under floor wax and silence, that rhythm meant a handshake protocol. A system waking up. A call for an administrator. Rowan closed his eyes. He tried to tell himself it wasn't his problem. He was a janitor. He was safe. He was invisible. But he remembered Seren's eyes. He remembered the heat of her skin burning with a fever that wasn't sickness, but energy. They call it care. It feels like a cage. He hadn't heard her say it, but he had seen it in the way she held the carpet. She wasn't sick. She was a battery. She was being drained, and Morrow didn't check her pulse. He checked the floor. Rowan opened his eyes. He reached into his bag and pulled out his old diagnostics deck, a contraband piece of tech he had sworn never to use again. He set it on the table. The screen lit up green. It picked up the signal immediately. It wasn't coming from the comms tower. It was coming from beneath the spire, from the foundation. "The floor isn't sick," Rowan whispered to the empty room. "I'm hungry." And for the first time in 5 years, Rowan Hale stopped being a ghost. He started typing. The storm howled against the hull, screaming to get in, but the real storm was already inside. And it had just handed Rowan the key. The archives were located in the bowels of the spire, a place where the air tasted of dust and dry parchment, rather than the jasmine-scented artificial breeze of the upper levels. It was the one place in the amber-crowned spire where history was allowed to gather dust rather than be rewritten by royal decree. Rowan Hale stood before a massive door made of oxidized copper. It was jammed. Not the kind of jammed that a kick could fix, but the kind of jammed that required a prayer or a plasma cutter. He knocked. It was a solid, dull sound. A voice, muffled by 3 inches of metal, shouted back, "Go away! The archives are closed for the Jubilee. Come back in 3 weeks, or when the monarchy falls, whichever comes first." Rowan leaned close to the intercom panel. "It is Rowan Tamsin. I have coffee. Real coffee. Not the synthetic sludge from the dispensers. I bartered a replacement servo motor for it with a smuggler on the supply docks." There was a pause. A heavy metallic clanking sound echoed from the other side, followed by the hiss of hydraulics, fighting against decades of grime. The door groaned and slid open just enough for a human to squeeze through sideways. Tamsin Quill stood there, adjusting a pair of spectacles that magnified her eyes to comical proportions. She was a foxkin, but she lacked the predatory elegance of the court. Her fur was a messy tawny brown, tufted at the ears, and her robes were stained with ink and sealing wax. She looked less like an imperial official and more like a rodent who had built a nest in a library. "You said coffee," Tamsin demanded, holding out a hand that was trembling slightly. Rowan handed her the thermos. She cracked it open, inhaled deeply, and let out a sound that was half sigh, half whimper. "You can come in," Tamsin said, stepping aside. "But do not touch the stacks. I have the lineage of the Third Dynasty organized by level of incompetence, and if you shuffle them, I will never find the utter failures again." Rowan stepped inside. The room was a labyrinth of data crystals and actual paper books towering in precarious heaps. It was a fire hazard, waiting for a spark, which was ironic, considering the name of what he had come to find. "I need to know about the floor in the royal nursery," Rowan said, cutting straight to the point. Tamsin froze mid-sip. She lowered the thermos slowly. "The floor," she repeated. "You mean the decorative paving stones imported from the quarry of—" "I mean the Ember Vault, Tamsin." The archivist stared at him. The humor drained from her face, replaced by a sharp, calculating intelligence that she usually kept hidden behind her chaotic persona. She walked over to a workbench covered in gears and locking mechanisms and set the coffee down. You are a janitor, Rowan. You clean toilets and fix heating ducts. You do not know words like Ember Vault. I know what a heat signature looks like when it is not generated by a machine, Rowan said, leaning against a stack of crates. I know that the floor under the princess woke up last night, and I know you are the only person in this spire who knows why. Tamsin sighed. She picked up a small, intricate brass lock from her desk and began fiddling with it. It is stuck, she said, gesturing to the lock with a frustrated flick of her wrist. 17th century tumblers. Impossible to pick. If you can open this without breaking it, I will tell you a bedtime story. But if you break it, I will report you for loitering. Rowan walked over. He took the lock from her. It was heavy, cool to the touch. He did not look at the keyhole. He felt the weight distribution. He closed his eyes, visualizing the internal springs. He pulled a thin tension wrench from his pocket, inserted it, and tapped the side of the casing with his fingernail. He twisted. Click. The shackle popped open. Rowan set the open lock on the desk. Story time, he said. Tamsin looked at the lock, then at Rowan. She shook her head. I always knew you were overqualified, she muttered. Fine. She walked into the depths of the shelving and returned with a heavy slate tablet. It was ancient, the edges chipped. She placed it on the desk. The Amber Crown Spire is not just a palace, Rowan Tamsin began, her voice low. It is a capstone, a cork in a bottle. Before the Foxkin took to the sky, there was a war for energy. The planet below was burning. To save civilization, the ancients built the Ember Vault. It is a reactor, yes, but it is also a library, a memory core. It holds the genetic maps, the history, and the power source that keeps this city floating. Rowan looked at the slate. It showed a diagram of the spire, and at its heart, directly beneath the room, labeled nursery, was a pulsating sphere. Is it alive? Rowan asked. In a sense, Tamsin said. It is biometric. It responds to the royal bloodline. But it is temperamental. It was sealed because it became unstable. It started feeding. It requires a connection to regulate the output, a living conduit. Tamsin tapped the sphere on the diagram. If someone tries to force it open without the proper key, a living key, the vault does not just open. It initiates a purge. It burns everything in a 10-mile radius to prevent the power from being stolen. Rowan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Seren, the Princess Rowan said. She was sleeping on it. She said she had to go back to the floor to breathe. Tamsin's eyes widened behind her spectacles. Oh, she whispered. Oh, that is cruel. What is it if she feels a need to be near it? Tamsin said, her voice trembling. It means the vault has already chosen its conduit. It is bonding with her. Or trying to. But if the connection is not completed, it drains her. It treats her like a battery that is not plugged in all the way. It is leaking energy through her. That is why she is weak. Rowan gripped the edge of the desk. Morrow knows, he said. He did not care about her health. He cared about the activation. He wants to open it. If Morrow forces the vault open, using her as a bridge before the bond is stable, Tamsin said, looking grim, he will burn her out. She will not survive the surge. She is the fuse, Rowan, and he is holding the match. Rowan turned to the door. Where are you going? Tamsin asked. To fix a leak, Rowan said. The medical wing was a sterile expanse of white tiles and chrome, smelling of antiseptic and despair. It was located 3 levels down from the nursery, guarded by automated sentries that scanned for authorized biosignatures. Rowan did not have an authorized biosignature, but he did have a work order for a faulty ventilation unit in the recovery ward which he had forged 10 minutes ago, using a terminal in the janitor's closet. He walked past the sentries, pushing a cart of air filters. The scanner swept over him. Maintenance authorized. Proceed. Being invisible had its perks. He navigated the corridors until he found room 404, The door was locked, but the keypad was a standard Imperial model. Rowan didn't hack it. That would leave a digital footprint. Instead, he unscrewed the maintenance panel next to the door, reached inside the wall, and manually tripped the solenoid that controlled the latch. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The room was dim. The only light came from the monitoring equipment buzzing softly by the bed. Seren lay there. She looked even smaller than she had on the nursery floor. Wires were attached to her temples, and her chest feeding data to a screen that pulsed with a slow, erratic rhythm. They had dressed her in a hospital gown that swallowed her frame. Her skin was pale, translucent, almost like fine china held up to a light. Rowan parked his cart by the vent and quietly walked to the bedside. He looked at the monitor. Her heart rate was 40 beats per minute. Too slow. He reached out, hovering his hand over hers, hesitant. Rowan. Her voice was a whisper, barely audible over the hum of the machines. Rowan flinched. He looked down. Her eyes were open, watching him. They were hazy with sedation, but there was a spark of recognition in the amber depths. "I didn't mean to wake you," he said softly. "I wasn't sleeping," Seren murmured. "It is hard to sleep here. It is too quiet. The floor doesn't hum." Rowan looked at the IV drip connected to her arm. The bag was labeled sedative, Class A. Enough to knock out a draft horse, yet she was awake. The vault's energy inside her was fighting the drugs. "Morrow said you were sick," Rowan said. "He told the whole spire you were contaminated by a laborer." Seren let out a weak, dry laugh. "Contaminated," she repeated. "Is that what they call it when someone catches you before you fall?" She tried to sit up, but her arms trembled and gave way. Rowan reached out instinctively, sliding an arm behind her shoulders to support her. She leaned into him, her head resting heavily against his chest. She was burning up again. "They keep giving me medicine," she whispered against his uniform, "to make me sleep, to make me a good girl. They call it care, Rowan. But it feels like a cage." Rowan felt a surge of anger so hot it nearly choked him. He looked around the room. The air vent above the bed was blasting freezing, recycled air directly onto her. The blanket she had was a thin, standard-issue thermal weave that did nothing for the chill in her bones. He gently lowered her back onto the pillows. "Hold on," he said. He went to his cart. He pulled out a roll of thermal insulation tape and a heavy wool-lined technician's coat he kept for working in the cryotunnels. He dragged a chair over to the vent and climbed up. In 3 quick movements, he redirected the airflow, taping the louvers, so the cold draft hit the wall instead of the bed. Then he took the coat. It was rough-stained with grease and smelling of machine oil, but it was thick and warm. He spread it over her, tucking the edges in around her shivering form. "It is not silk," he said, stepping back, "but it holds heat." Seren pulled the collar of the rough coat up to her chin. She inhaled the scent of oil and ozone. She looked at him, and for the first time her eyes cleared completely. "It smells real," she said. She looked at his hands hanging by his sides. "Why did you come?" she asked. "You could be arrested. Or worse." Rowan shrugged, looking away. "I don't like leaving a job unfinished," he said. The regulator needed adjusting. Seren smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but it transformed her face. "You are a terrible liar, Rowan Hale." "Maybe," Rowan said. He looked back at her. "Morrow is planning something. The storm is keeping the court distracted. He wants the vault. And he thinks you are the key." "I am not a key," Seren said, her voice bitter. "I am the broken lock. That is why I am the weakest. I can't hold the power. It just spills out." "Tamsin says it is because the bond isn't finished," Rowan said. "You aren't broken, Seren. You are incomplete. There is a difference." Seren stared at him. No one had ever told her she wasn't broken. Her entire life, her mother, the court, the doctors, they all treated her like a cracked vessel. "You talk like a scientist," she said softly. "For a janitor." "I read a lot of manuals," Rowan deflected. "Listen, You have to stay awake. Fight the sedative. If you drift too deep, you might not be able to stop him if he tries to move you. Move me where? Back to the nursery, Rowan said. But not to sleep. To open the door. The door to the room hissed open. Rowan spun around, dropping into a defensive crouch, a heavy wrench appearing in his hand from his belt loop in a blur of motion. It was not a guard. It was a nurse, a young human male with terrified eyes, carrying a tray of food. He dropped the tray. It clattered loudly on the tiles. "Oh God," the nurse stammered. "I didn't see anything. I swear." "Get out," Rowan said, his voice low and dangerous. The nurse fled. Rowan turned back to Seren. "I have to go. They will send security." Seren reached out a hand from under the heavy coat. Rowan took it. Her grip was weak, but her skin was warm. "Come back," she said. "Please." "I will," Rowan promised. He slipped out the maintenance hatch, just as the heavy boots of the palace guard thundered down the hallway. The rumors started by breakfast. Morrow did not make a public accusation. He was too subtle for that. Instead, he let the whispers do the work. By noon, the entire service staff knew that a rogue element in the maintenance department had violated quarantine protocols. Rowan could feel the eyes on him as he walked into the mess hall. Conversations died. People looked at their plates. He grabbed a nutrient bar and a pouch of water and sat at an empty table in the corner. A shadow fell over him. It was Miller, his supervisor. Miller looked pale. Hale Miller said, not making eye contact. "You have been reassigned." Again, Rowan asked, unwrapping the bar. "Waste reclamation was too good for you, apparently," Miller said nervously. "You are on external sensor duty. Sector 9. Sector 9 was outside the blast shields. In the storm." "That is a death sentence," Rowan said calmly. "The wind shear alone will rip a man off the hull." "Orders came from the top," Miller said, dropping a work chit on the table. "Sorry, Rowan." Rowan looked at the chit. It was signed by Chancellor Morrow. He stood up. He did not argue. He walked out of the mess hall, feeling the weight of the social exile pressing down on him. They looked at him like he had a disease. Character versus society, Rowan thought grimly. The most uneven fight there is. He did not go to Sector 9. He went to the security hub of the East Wing. He needed to see what Bex Rourke was doing. Rowan found a ventilation grate that overlooked the main security office. He peered through the slats. Bex was pacing. She was arguing with a hologram of Morrow. "Sir, this deviates from standard containment," Bex was saying, her voice tight. "Moving the subject during a Class 5 storm is reckless. The structural integrity of the transport tunnels is compromised. The subject's condition is deteriorating," Bex Morrow's voice soothed from the speaker. "The medical wing is not equipped for the specific energy surges she is experiencing. We must return her to the isolation of the nursery. It is the only place shielded enough to contain her." "Then let me escort her," Bex insisted. "My team is ready," Morrow said. His holographic face smiled, but it was cold. "Your team is needed at the perimeter. We have reports of insurgents attempting to breach the lower airlocks during the storm. You are the only one I trust to hold the line, Bex. Insurgents." Bex frowned. "In a hurricane." "That is tactical suicide. Desperation makes people do foolish things," Morrow said. "Hold the line, Commander. I will handle the princess personally." The hologram flickered and died. Bex stood there for a long moment. She looked at the empty air where Morrow's face had been. She tapped her claws against her sidearm. "Tactical suicide," she muttered to herself. "Or a distraction." She turned and walked to her console. She began typing, pulling up the internal sensor logs. Rowan watched as she flagged the file labeled Hail Rowan. She stared at his picture for a long moment. Then, she pulled up another file, Vault, Energy Output. She compared the timestamps. The spike in the vault's energy coincided exactly with the moment Rowan had touched the floor. She narrowed her eyes. She wasn't convinced Rowan was innocent, but she was starting to realize that Morrow was lying about the insurgents. Rowan pulled back from the grate. Bex was smart. Too smart. If she put the pieces together, she might interfere before Rowan could stop Morrow. Or she might help. But he couldn't risk contact yet. He needed proof. Rowan made his way to the sub-basement levels, where the ancient pneumatic lines of the spire's nervous system converged. If Morrow was planning to open the vault, he would need to bypass the safety interlocks that prevented the nursery floor from sliding open. The sub-basement was a jungle of cables and pipes, hissing steam and dripping condensation. Rowan moved through the shadows, his multi-tool humming in his hand. He found the junction box for the nursery's hydraulic systems. It was an antique mechanism, a relic from the original construction. He shone his light on the casing. There were fresh scratches on the screws. Rowan knelt. He adjusted his ocular implant, a remnant from his forensic days, and zoomed in. The scratches were microscopic, but to him, they were screaming. Someone had forced the panel. He opened it. Inside, the copper wiring had been rerouted. A bypass shunt had been installed, glowing with a faint violet pulse. It was a piece of tech Rowan recognized. It was a thief's bridge, a device used to hotwire starship engines. Illegal, dangerous, and definitely not standard Imperial issue. Morrow isn't just opening the door. Rowan realized a chill running down his spine. He is blowing the hinges off. If Morrow triggered this bypass, the floor wouldn't slide open gracefully. It would shatter. The sudden release of containment would destabilize the vault. It wouldn't just kill Seren. It could drop the entire spire out of the sky. Rowan reached out to rip the shunt out. Stop, he told himself, freezing his hand inches from the wire. If he pulled it now, the system would alert Morrow that the tamper had been discovered. Morrow would accelerate his timeline. He would drag Seren there, immediately, storm or no storm. Rowan needed to be smarter. He needed to disable the bypass in a way that looked like a system failure, not sabotage. He pulled a small canister of liquid nitrogen spray from his belt. He aimed it at the shunt's battery unit. He gave it a short, controlled burst. The battery froze. The chemical reaction inside slowed to a crawl. It wasn't dead, but it was sluggish. When Morrow tried to activate it, there would be a delay. A lag. Maybe 30 seconds. Maybe a minute. It wasn't much. But in a system forensic battle, a minute was a lifetime. Rowan closed the panel. He stood up and wiped his hands on his trousers. He felt the vibration in his hand again. Short. Long. Long. Short. It was stronger now. Urgent. He closed his eyes and let his mind drift, reaching out to that feeling. He wasn't a mystic. He was an engineer. He understood signals. And this was a signal. I am here, he thought, projecting the thought toward the floor, toward the vault, toward Seren. I am listening. For a second, the vibration changed. It smoothed out. It felt like a sigh. He opened his eyes. He wasn't alone in his head anymore. He could feel a faint, terrified presence at the back of his mind. It was Seren. She was dreaming, and in her dream, she was reaching for him. He wasn't just a janitor to her, and she wasn't just a princess to him. They were the only two people in the spire who could hear the song of the machine that kept them all alive. Rowan found Tamsin back in the archives, frantically packing scrolls into a waterproof satchel. You look like you are fleeing the country, Rowan said. I am preparing for a rapid structural disassembly, Tamsin corrected, shoving a map into the bag. If Morrow opens the vault during a magnetic storm, gravity is going to become a suggestion, rather than a law. I plan to be near an escape pod. Rowan grabbed her shoulder. I need a way in, Tamsin. The main lifts are locked down. The corridors are full of guards. Morrow is moving her tonight. Tamsin looked at him. She saw the grease on his face, the desperation in his eyes, and the quiet, terrifying resolve that had replaced his usual dry humor. She sighed and stopped packing. She reached under her desk and pulled out a large rolled sheet of blueprints. She spread it out over the piles of books. Here, she pointed a claw at a thin, winding shaft that ran parallel to the main waste disposal chute. This is the service crawl space for the atmospheric scrubbers, Tamsin said. It is tight. It is filthy. And it hasn't been opened in 50 years. It leads directly behind the wall of the nursery. Rowan studied the map. It was perfect. Why isn't this on the security grid, he asked. Because I deleted it from the digital records 10 years ago so I could sneak up to the royal kitchens and steal pastries, Tamsin said, deadpan. Do not judge me. The lemon tarts are exquisite. Rowan almost smiled. Almost. Thank you, Tamsin. Don't thank me yet, she said. There is a catch. The hatch to enter this shaft is in Sector 4. Rowan stiffened. Sector 4 was the barracks for the Royal Guard. Bex Rourke's territory. I will manage, Rowan said. Rowan Tamsin said, her voice soft. Why are you doing this? You could steal a shuttle and leave. You have the skills. Why stay for a girl you met once? Rowan looked at the map, tracing the line to the nursery. Because she looked at me, Tamsin, he said quietly. She looked at me, and she didn't see a janitor. She saw a person. And she is the only one in this whole damn sky who did. He rolled up the map. And because I fixed things, he added. And this is broken. Getting into Sector 4 was easy. Getting through it was the problem. Rowan moved through the ventilation ducts, crawling on his belly. The metal was freezing, conducting the cold of the storm outside. Below him, through the grates, he could see the royal guards prepping. They were sharpening blades, checking energy rifles. They looked ready for war. He reached the access hatch Tamsin had marked. It was located in a supply closet at the end of the barracks hallway. He dropped down from the vent, landing silently in the closet. He found the hatch behind a rack of cleaning supplies. It was rusted shut. He applied leverage with his pry bar. The metal groaned. Who is there? The voice came from the hallway. Rowan froze. He heard footsteps, heavy boots. He didn't have time to finesse the hatch. He jammed the bar in and heaved with everything he had. The rust gave way, with a screech that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet corridor. The door to the closet was kicked open. Rowan spun around, holding the pry bar like a baseball bat. It was Bex Rourke. She stood there, blocking the exit, her shock baton crackling with blue energy. I knew it, she hissed. I knew you were a rat in the walls. Rowan didn't attack. He held his ground. I am not a rat, Bex. I am the only one trying to keep this ship in the air. Drop the weapon, Bex ordered, stepping forward. Rowan dropped the pry bar. It clattered on the floor. Morrow is moving, the Princess Rowan said, speaking fast. He is taking her to the nursery. He has rigged the vault floor with a thief's bridge bypass. He is going to force it open. Bex paused. The mention of the thief's bridge made her ear flick. That is illegal tech, she said. The Chancellor wouldn't risk that. He is desperate, Rowan said. Look at your logs, Bex. Why did he send you to the perimeter for insurgents that don't exist? Why is he moving a sick girl in a Class 5 storm? He needs you out of the way. Bex stared at him. Her grip on the baton loosened slightly. She was a soldier, but she was also a protector. And everything Rowan said aligned with the nagging doubts in her own head. Give me one reason not to stun you right now, she said. Because if you do, Rowan said, looking her dead in the eye, the princess dies, and the spire falls, and you will be the one who let it happen because you followed orders instead of your instincts. Bex looked at the open hatch behind Rowan. Then she looked at the hallway. She reached up and tapped her comms unit. Command, this is Rourke. Sector 4 is clear. No sign of the intruder. I am proceeding to the perimeter to check for structural leaks. She lowered the baton. You have 5 minutes, she said to Rowan. If the spire is still standing in an hour, I will arrest you myself. Fair enough, Rowan said. He turned and dove into the hatch. The crawl space was a nightmare of cobwebs and claustrophobia. Rowan had to drag himself forward by his elbows, the map memorized in his head. He could feel the spire shaking around him. The storm was battering the hull, the wind howling like a wounded animal. But beneath the wind he felt the other vibration, the pulse of the vault. It was frantic now. He reached the end of the shaft. There was a grate. Through it, he could see the nursery. It was changed. The toys were gone. The furniture had been pushed against the walls. In the center of the room, the carpet had been ripped away, exposing the full expanse of the gray stone floor and its glowing geometric lines. Morrow was there. He stood by the window watching the lightning arc across the sky. He looked manic, his usual composure fraying at the edges. Two guards dragged Seren into the room. She was limp, her feet dragging on the stone. They had dressed her in a ceremonial robe of heavy gold fabric that looked like it weighed more than she did. Her head lolled forward. "Place her on the focus," Morrow commanded. The guards carried her to the center of the geometric pattern and dropped her. Seren groaned. Her hand slapped against the cold stone. Immediately, the floor lit up. The amber light surged brighter than before, angry and violent. Morrow laughed. "Perfect," he whispered. Rowan pushed against the grate. It was screwed tight. He needed to get out. He needed to stop this. He saw Seren try to push herself up. She looked at Morrow. "Please," she rasped. "It hurts." "It is supposed to hurt, my dear," Morrow said, walking toward her. "Great power always demands a sacrifice, and you have so much to give." He pulled a device from his robe, a remote trigger for the bypass shunt Rowan had tampered with. Rowan jammed his fingers through the mesh of the grate. He couldn't get it open in time. Morrow raised the remote. "Open wide," Morrow said. He pressed the button. Nothing happened. Morrow frowned. He pressed it again. Nothing. Rowan grinned in the darkness. "Liquid nitrogen, you son of a bee." Morrow shook the remote. "Why isn't it triggering?" He turned to the guards. "The bypass is lagging. Manual override. Get the pry bars. We open it by hand." The guards hesitated. To pry open the floor while the energy was surging was suicide. "Do it!" Morrow screamed, his face twisting into a mask of rage. As the guards moved forward, Seren turned her head. She looked toward the wall, toward the hidden grate where Rowan was hiding. She couldn't see him, but she knew. Rowan kicked the grate. Once. Twice. The screws shrieked. He burst into the room just as the guards raised their iron bars. He didn't look like a ghost anymore. He looked like a storm. "Get away from her," Rowan roared, charging across the glowing floor. The storm outside had ceased to be weather and had become a siege. The amber crown spire groaned under the assault of the sky storm, the titanium struts singing a discordant melody that vibrated through the soles of every boot in the palace. But nowhere was the vibration more violent, more sentient than in the royal nursery. The room had been stripped. The plush carpets, the floating cribs, the toys of spun glass, all had been shoved against the walls or removed entirely. What remained was the floor. The ancient gray composite stone lay exposed, etched with geometric lines that pulsed with a feverish amber rhythm. It looked less like architecture and more like an exposed nervous system. Seren lay in the center of the web. She was not asleep. Sleep was a luxury for the safe. She was drifting in a haze of exhaustion and terrifying connectivity. The stone beneath her cheek felt hot, impossibly hot, yet it did not burn her skin. It felt like it was soldering itself to her bones. She could hear the vault deep below. It was not humming anymore. It was screaming. It was a soundless roar that demanded to be let out. If he opens it, Seren thought, her mind sluggish and heavy, it will not be a door. It will be a mouth. She tried to lift her head. Her neck felt too weak to support the weight of the ceremonial headdress Chancellor Morrow had forced upon her. It was a heavy thing of gold and wire meant to look regal, but it felt like a shackle. Morrow stood by the majestic window, his back to her. He was watching the violet lightning arc across the clouds below. He held a staff in his hand. Not a weapon, but a ceremonial rod of office, topped with a prism that caught the flashes of the storm. "Beautiful," Morrow murmured. "The chaos outside is merely the prelude to the order we are about to impose inside." He turned. He was not alone. 4 men stood in the shadows of the room. They were not palace guards. They wore unmarked gray armor their faces obscured by tactical visors. They were the Chancellor's private cleaners men, who did not exist on the royal payroll. "Is the bypass ready?" Morrow asked. One of the men checked a handheld device. "The signal is lagging, sir. Something is interfering with the receiver. We might have to trigger the sequence manually at the source." Morrow frowned, his smooth face rippling with annoyance. "Manually, that lacks elegance, but it doesn't matter. The storm provides excellent cover. No one will hear the floor scream." He walked toward Seren. His boots clicked sharply on the stone. He towered over her, looking down, not with malice, but with the dispassionate curiosity of a vivisectionist. "You look uncomfortable, Highness," Morrow said softly. "Do not worry. Once the vault opens, you will not feel anything at all. You will ascend." Seren managed to focus her eyes on him. "You are going to kill us all," she whispered. Her voice was a dry rasp. "The spire cannot take the surge." "The spire is dead weight," Morrow dismissed. "With the vault, I do not need the spire. I can build a new one, a better one." He gestured to the guards. "Secure her to the focal point. If she thrashes when the lock breaks, we lose the connection." Two of the gray-armored men stepped forward. They carried heavy magnetic clamps. Seren tried to scramble backward, but her limbs were water. She gasped as rough hands grabbed her shoulders, pinning her to the glowing lines of the floor. "No," she pleaded. "Please." "It is too late for you, please," Morrow said. He raised his staff. "Begin the clang." The sound was not magical. It was distinct, metallic, and utterly mundane. It was the sound of a heavy maintenance hatch hitting the floor. Morrow spun around. From the wall, where a decorative tapestry had been pushed aside, a dark, rectangular hole gaped open. And climbing out of it, brushing cobwebs from his shoulders, was Rowan Hale. He looked terrible. His gray uniform was smeared with grease and black dust. His face was streaked with sweat. He was breathing hard, but he stood upright, adjusting the strap of his heavy tool bag. Morrow stared. For a moment he was too baffled to speak. He had expected the Royal Guard. He had expected Bex Rourke. He had not expected the janitor to crawl out of the ventilation shaft. Rowan looked at the guards holding Seren. He looked at the glowing floor. He looked at Morrow. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a roll of industrial insulation tape. "You picked the wrong night to redecorate the floor," Rowan said. His voice was calm, almost bored, though his eyes were hard as flint. "The humidity is murder on the finish." Morrow's shock evaporated into cold fury. "Hale, I told you I would feed you to the engines." "Yeah, I remember," Rowan said, walking forward. He didn't rush. He walked with the steady, measured pace of a man inspecting a leaky pipe. "But I checked the schedule. Engines are down for maintenance, so here I am." "Kill him," Morrow snapped to the remaining two guards. The guards raised their shock rifles. Seren cried out, "Rowan, run!" Rowan did not run. He dropped his bag. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a canister of expanding insulation foam and a handful of fiber optic cables. "Wrong tool," Rowan muttered. He threw the canister. Not at the guards, but at the floor between them. As it hit the stone, he triggered the nozzle with a precise kick. The canister exploded. But instead of shrapnel, it erupted in a massive cloud of rapidly hardening white acoustic foam. It blinded the guards, instantly coating their visors and clogging the barrels of their rifles. "What is this?" one guard shouted, clawing at his helmet. "Industrial sealant," Rowan said, stepping through the cloud. "Sets in 3 seconds. Guaranteed to hold against vacuum pressure." He didn't stop. He moved with a fluidity that belied his profession. While the guards stumbled, Rowan knelt by the nearest exposed junction of the floor's glowing lines. He jammed the fiber optic cables into the groove of the stone. "Get him!" Morrow screamed, backing away. Rowan ignored him. He connected the other end of the cables to a small, beat-up vibration meter he held in his hand. He wasn't trying to break the floor. He was trying to talk to it. "Okay," Rowan whispered to the stone. "You want to scream? Let's scream." He twisted the dial on the meter. He fed a feedback loop into the floor's sensory grid. The floor reacted instantly. The amber light flared to a blinding white. A shockwave of pure kinetic energy rippled out from where Rowan knelt. It was not a destructive blast, but a repulsive one, a defense mechanism of the vault designed to push unauthorized matter away. The two blinded guards were lifted off their feet and thrown backward against the far wall with a bone-jarring crunch. Morrow staggered, barely keeping his balance with his staff. The two guards holding Seren were knocked loose by the vibration. They released her, stumbling back, their magnetic boots sparking as they tried to grip the shaking stone. Rowan was there in a heartbeat. He slid across the glowing floor and grabbed Seren, pulling her into the center of the geometric circle he had just rewired. "Got you," he said, breathless. Seren clung to him. Her hands were ice cold. "You came back." "I had a work order," Rowan grunted, pulling a length of cable from his belt. He quickly looped it around a heavy stanchion and clipped it to his belt, tethering them both to the most stable point in the room. "Hold on. It is going to get bumpy." Morrow recovered his balance. He looked at the chaos at his incapacitated guards, and then at the janitor who was currently hacking the Royal Heritage Site with a roll of wire. "You are not maintenance," Morrow hissed. He raised his hand, signaling the two guards who were still standing. "He is manipulating the pressure sensors. Switch to blades. Cut him out of the circuit." The guards drew serrated vibroblades. They advanced on the circle. Rowan looked at Seren. "Do you trust me?" Seren looked at the guards approaching with weapons drawn. She looked at Rowan's dirty face, at the determined set of his jaw. "Yes," she said. "Good," Rowan said. "Close your eyes." Rowan turned back to his meter. He didn't have weapons. He didn't have armor. But he had spent 10 years in system forensics, reading the blueprints of dead empires. He knew that the Ember Vault wasn't just a battery. It was a computer. And right now he has admin privileges. He tapped a sequence into the meter. The geometric lines on the floor shifted. The light changed from white to a deep, angry red. "Floor is lava," Rowan deadpanned. He slammed his hand onto the stone. The section of floor beneath the advancing guards suddenly liquefied. It didn't melt. The molecular bonds of the composite stone unlocked at the command of the vault, turning solid rock into quicksand for exactly 2 seconds. The guards stepped forward and sank to their knees. Then, Rowan released the command. The floor snapped back to solid stone. The guards screamed as the rock solidified around their legs, trapping them in an unbreakable geological vice. They were immobilized, their blades clattering uselessly to the ground. Rowan stood up, wiping his hands on his trousers. "That is going to be a pain to chip out." Morrow stared at him. The arrogance was gone from the Chancellor's face, replaced by a dawning, terrified realization. "Who are you?" Morrow whispered. "A janitor cannot do that. That is old code." Rowan stepped in front of Seren, shielding her. "I used to stop people like you, Morrow. People who think history is just something to be strip-mined for power." Morrow's face twisted. "You are a ghost, a relic, and relics can be broken." Morrow threw aside his staff. He reached into his robes and pulled out a pistol. It was a sleek, silver energy weapon. Not a stunner. A killer. "Step away from her, Hale," Morrow commanded, leveling the gun at Rowan's chest. "I do not need you alive to open the door." Rowan tensed. He had no tricks left for a bullet. He shifted his weight, preparing to tackle Morrow, knowing he wouldn't make it in time. "Rowan," Seren whispered, trying to pull him back. "No more games," Morrow said. His finger tightened on the trigger. Boom. The double doors of the nursery didn't open. They were blown off their hinges. Smoke filled the entryway. Through the haze, a figure stepped in. It was Bex Rourke. She was not alone. Behind her stood a squad of Royal Guards, weapons raised. But Bex was the focal point. She looked furious. She looked like a Valkyrie who had missed breakfast. "Drop the weapon, Chancellor," Bex roared. Her voice cracked like a whip. Morrow didn't drop it. He swung the gun toward Bex. "Commander Rourke, this man is a saboteur. He has compromised the vault. Kill him." Bex didn't fire. She stepped into the room, her eyes sweeping over the scene. She saw the guards trapped on the floor. She saw the foam-covered men groaning by the wall. And she saw Rowan standing over the princess, shielding her with his body armed with nothing but a pair of wire cutters. She looked at Morrow. She saw the lethal pistol in his hand, a weapon that was strictly forbidden inside the royal nursery. "I said drop it," Bex repeated, her voice lower, more dangerous. "You are in violation of the Crown Safety Act, Section 42, brandishing a Class A lethal weapon in the presence of the heir." "I am the Chancellor," Morrow shouted, his composure shattering completely. "I am the law. Do you not see what he is doing? He is stealing the vault." "He is standing still, sir," Bex said coldly. "You are the one waving a gun." "He is a traitor," Morrow yelled. "Shoot him, Bex. That is a direct order." Bex hesitated. The chain of command was iron in her mind. But the sight in front of her broke the chain. Rowan spoke up. He didn't shout. He kept his voice level. "Check the floor logs, Bex. Ask him why he brought a thief's bridge to a nursery. Ask him why his men are wearing unmarked armor." Morrow fired. He didn't fire at Bex. He fired at Rowan. Rowan dove, knocking Saren flat. The bolt of energy seared the air where his head had been scorching the tapestry on the back wall. "Hostile!" Bex shouted. "Take him down!" The royal guards opened fire, but Morrow was fast. He activated a personal shield generator on his belt, another piece of illegal tech. The blue energy barrier flared around him, absorbing the stun bolts. He turned and ran. Not toward the door, but toward Saren. "If I cannot open it with finesse," Morrow snarled, "I will open it with brute force." He lunged through the shield fire, ignoring the impacts that shook his barrier. He reached down and grabbed Saren by the wrist. "Let go!" Rowan yelled, scrambling up. Morrow yanked Saren up with surprising strength. He dragged her toward the center of the room, toward the focal point where the energy was strongest. "Open!" Morrow screamed at the floor. "Open for your master!" He forced Saren's hand down onto the burning stone. Saren screamed. The vault answered. The room pitched sideways. Gravity seemed to fold in on itself. A pillar of amber light erupted from the floor, engulfing Saren and Morrow. The force of it threw Rowan back against the wall. "Saren!" Rowan shouted, fighting to stand against the pressure. Inside the pillar of light, Morrow was laughing. He thought he had won. He thought the energy flowing through him was victory. "I see it!" Morrow cried, his eyes burning with reflected fire. "I see the core." But Saren was not laughing. She was weeping. The energy was tearing through her, using her fragile nervous system as a conduit to bypass the safety protocols. Rowan saw her face. She was fading. Her eyes were rolling back. He had to stop it. He looked at the mess of cables he had left on the floor. The feedback loop. It was still connected. He could crawl there. He could cut the line. But that would only stop the noise. It wouldn't break the connection Morrow had forced. He needed to overload the sensor. He needed to trick the vault into thinking the connection was tainted. Rowan looked at Bex. She was pinned down by the gravity wave, unable to move. "Bex!" Rowan shouted over the roar of the energy. "The camera, the security feed, is it recording?" "Yes," Bex shouted back, shielding her eyes. "It is live on the internal network." "Good." Rowan grabbed a heavy canister of cleaning solvent from his fallen bag. It was highly conductive. He didn't run at Morrow. He couldn't. The energy field was too strong. Instead, he ran at the wall panel, the main interface for the room's environmental controls. He smashed the panel with the canister. Sparks flew. "Hey, Morrow!" Rowan yelled. Morrow looked out from the pillar of light, his face twisted in ecstasy. "You are too late, Janitor. I am the Spire now." "You're not the Spire," Rowan yelled. "You're just a virus." Rowan jammed the conductive canister into the exposed circuitry of the wall panel. And I'm the antivirus. He grabbed 2 live wires from the wall. One was the main power feed. The other was the emergency grounding line. He touched them together. The resulting spark was blinding. But it wasn't just a short circuit. Rowan used his body as the bridge to channel the surge directly into the floor's grid, bypassing the safety regulators he had studied for 6 months. He sent a signal. Not a command to open. Not a command to close. He sent a command reject. The vault, sensing the chaotic, unauthorized surge of dirty electricity mixed with the pure biometric signal, panicked. It did exactly what it was designed to do to protect itself from corruption. It purged. The amber light turned instantly to a void like black. A shockwave of silence slammed into the room. The connection broke. Morrow was thrown out of the circle as if he had been punched by a giant. He flew across the room, his shield shattering, and smashed into the far wall. He slid down unconscious, his robe smoking. Seren collapsed. The light in the floor died. The humming stopped. The gravity returned to normal. Rowan fell to his knees. His hands were burned, his uniform singed. He gasped for air, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Silence reigned in the nursery. "Seren," Rowan croaked. He crawled toward her. She lay on the cold stone, unmoving. Her ceremonial headdress had fallen off, rolling away like a discarded toy. Rowan reached her. He gathered her into his arms. She was limp. Her skin was gray. "No," Rowan whispered. "No, no, no. Don't you do this. Don't you dare." He pressed his ear to her chest. Silence. "Medic!" Rowan screamed, his voice breaking. "Get a medic in here." Bex was already moving. She scrambled to her feet, tapping her comms frantically. "Medical team to the nursery emergency. We have code black. I repeat, code black." Rowan ignored the commotion. He ignored the guards securing Morrow. He ignored Bex. He focused entirely on the girl in his arms. He placed his hands on her chest. He started CPR. "Come on!" he gritted out, pumping her chest. "Come on, Seren. You are not weak. You are not weak. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe." He breathed air into her lungs. Nothing. "You listen to the floor," Rowan said, tears cutting tracks through the soot on his face. "Now, listen to me. Come back." He pressed again, and then he felt it. Not a heartbeat. A vibration. It came from her skin. A faint amber glow began to pulse beneath her collarbone. It wasn't the violent energy of the vault. It was softer, warmer. It traveled from her chest to his hands. Rowan froze. Seren gasped. It was a jagged, desperate intake of air. Her eyes flew open. They weren't just amber anymore. For a second, they were molten gold. She coughed, her body convulsing. Rowan pulled her up, holding her tight against him, rocking her. "I've got you. I've got you. Breathe." Seren clung to him, burying her face in his ruined uniform. She was shaking uncontrollably. "Rowan," she sobbed. "It knows me." "I know," Rowan whispered, stroking her hair with his trembling hand. "I know." Bex stood over them. She looked at the unconscious chancellor, then at the janitor holding the princess. She reached down and turned off the recording on her helmet. "Secure the prisoner," Bex ordered her guards, pointing at Morrow. "And get a stretcher." She looked at Rowan. "Good work, Hale," she said quietly. Rowan didn't look up. He just held Seren, watching the storm outside begin to break, the violet lightning fading into the dawn. But as he held her, he looked at the floor. The geometric lines were dark now, dead, except for one line. A single thin vein of amber light was pulsing slowly, rhythmically leading from the center of the room directly to Seren's foot. The vault hadn't rejected her. It had rejected Morrow, but it kept her. Rowan felt a cold dread settle over him. He had saved her life, but he hadn't saved her from the vault. The connection was permanent. Seren slumped against him, fainting from exhaustion. Rowan held her, staring at the line of light. "We are not done yet," he whispered to the sleeping girl. "We are not done yet." The silence that followed the explosion in the royal nursery was heavier than the storm. The amber crown spire, usually a hive of whispered gossip and electronic hums, felt suspended in a vacuum. The blast doors had been sealed. The corridors were empty, save for the rhythmic patrol of the royal guard, who now looked at every shadow with suspicion. In the Empress's private audience chamber, the air was cold. It was a room of frosted glass and silver designed to intimidate, but Empress Calith did not need architecture to be terrifying. She sat on a high-backed chair, her posture rigid, her hands folded in her lap. Her fur was a pristine, snowy white, a stark contrast to the bruised purple of the sky outside the window. She did not shout. She did not throw things. She simply stared at the man kneeling in the center of the room. Chancellor Morrow Sable was in Binder's magnetic cuffs that locked his wrists behind his back. He had been stripped of his outer robes, leaving him in his tunic. His face was bruised where he had hit the wall, but his expression was not one of defeat. It was the look of a chess player who had lost a knight, but was still confident in his queen. Standing to the side, looking like a smudge of grease on a wedding dress, was Rowan Hale. He had refused to change out of his ruined uniform. He wanted them to see the dirt. He wanted them to smell the ozone and the burnt insulation foam. "You fired a weapon," Empress Calith said. Her voice was soft like ice cracking. "In the nursery, my daughter." "I fired at a saboteur, Majesty," Morrow said smoothly. "I was attempting to prevent a catastrophic breach of the vault." "By forcing the princess onto an active energy core?" Calith asked. "By utilizing the air's natural connection to stabilize the grid," Morrow corrected. Desperate times called for bold measures. The storm was threatening the structural integrity of the spire. I made a command decision. "You made a coup attempt," said a voice from the doorway. Bex Rourke stepped in. She was still in full tactical gear, looking exhausted, but ferocious. She carried a data slate. "I have the logs, Majesty," Bex said, walking past Morrow without looking at him. The structural integrity of the spire was at 98%. There was no threat to the grid until the Chancellor authorized the use of a Thief's Bridge bypass on the vault floor. Morrow's eyes flickered. A necessary tool. The standard protocols were too slow. "It is illegal tech," Bex said, handing the slate to the Empress. "And he brought it into the nursery 3 hours before the storm peaked. This was premeditated." Calith took the slate. She scrolled through the data, her amber eyes narrowing. She wasn't just looking at the numbers. She was looking at the betrayal. Morrow had been her advisor for 20 years. He had sat at her table. He had held Seren as a baby. "You knew," Calith whispered. "You knew the vault was rejecting the seal, and instead of telling me, you tried to break the lock." "I tried to give you a weapon." Morrow snapped his composure, cracking for a second. "The vault is the ultimate power, and we treat it like a shameful secret. I wanted to give the Foxkin dominion over this entire system, not just this floating rock." "And Seren?" Calith asked. "What was she to be in this dominion?" Morrow shrugged. It was a chilling, dismissive gesture. "A fuse, Majesty. Every engine needs a spark. Some sparks burn out." The sound of the slap echoed through the large room. Calith hadn't used her hand. She had used her fan, a ceremonial object, made of heavy folded steel. She had struck him across the face with enough force to draw blood. "Take him away!" Calith ordered, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Confine him to the obsidian tower. No visitors. No communications." "You cannot hold me forever, Calith," Morrow spat as the guards hauled him up. Blood trickled down his chin. "The girl is dying. You saw it. The vault has tasted her now. It won't let go. When she fades, the vault will open, and you will need me to control it." The doors slammed shut behind him. Calith stood there for a long moment, breathing hard. Then the Empress vanished, and the mother appeared. She slumped back into her chair, covering her face with her hands. "Tell me he is wrong," she whispered. Rowan stepped forward. He felt painfully out of place, a janitor addressing a monarch, but he couldn't stay silent. "He is wrong about the control," Rowan said. "But he is right about the connection." Calith looked up at him. "And who are you? The man who ruined my floor." "I am the man who fixed it," Rowan said. "Temporarily." "Bex says you are maintenance," Calith said, studying him. "But maintenance workers do not rewire ancient energy grids with cleaning solvent." "I have a diverse resume," Rowan said. "Majesty, the vault isn't just an engine. It's a biometric lock. Morrow forced it open, but he didn't close it properly. He just slammed the door on your daughter's fingers." Calith flinched at the image. "Where is she?" Rowan asked. "The medical wing," Calith said. "She is awake, but she is different." The lights in the medical wing were dimmed to a twilight glow. The hum of machinery was softer here, respectful of the precarious life it was sustaining. Seren lay in a recovery pod, but the glass cover was open. She refused to be enclosed. She was wearing a simple cotton gown, her pale hair spread out on the pillow like a halo of frost. When Rowan walked in, she didn't look at him immediately. She was looking at her hands. She was turning them over and over, examining the skin as if it were a foreign material. "Hey," Rowan said softly from the doorway. Serene jumped slightly, then relaxed when she saw him. "Hey!" Rowan walked over to the chair beside the pod. He sat down heavily. His adrenaline had crashed hours ago, leaving him aching in places he didn't know he had muscles. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "And don't say fine. I saw the readouts." "I feel heavy," Seren admitted. She lowered her hands. "Like gravity is pulling on me harder than everyone else." "That is the residue," Rowan said. "The vault's energy signature. It's clinging to your biofield. It takes time to dissipate." "It won't dissipate, Rowan," Seren said. Her voice was quiet, devoid of hope. "I can hear it. It is whispering to me. Down in the dark. It is waiting." She looked at him, and her eyes were dry. "I always knew I was different. My sisters, they are strong. They hunt, they dance, they play political games, and I just sleep." She laughed a bitter sound. "I thought I was just a mistake, a genetic error. But I wasn't, was I? I was a spare part. A living key made to fit a lock that no one wanted to open." "You are not a part," Rowan said firmly. "Aren't I?" Seren challenged him. "Look at what happened. Morrow used me to open it. You used me to close it. I am just the object in the middle, the doorstop." Rowan felt a sharp pang of guilt. He looked down at his hands, hands that were stained with oil and carbon. Hands that had spent a lifetime fixing machines, twisting valves, forcing gears to mesh. "I didn't use you," Rowan said, his voice rough. "I grounded the circuit. It was the only way to get the feedback loop to stop." "I know," Seren said. She reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cool, but the touch sent a jolt through him. "I am not blaming you. You saved me. But it made me realize what I am. I am a tool, Rowan. That is why I am the weakest child. Because tools aren't supposed to have lives. They are just supposed to sit on the shelf until they are needed." Rowan looked at her hand. He remembered the feeling of her body against his in the nursery, the way she had clung to him, not as a princess, but as a terrified girl. "I used to work in system forensics," Rowan said suddenly. He hadn't told anyone this in 5 years. "My job wasn't just reading data. It was containment. I built digital cages for rogue AIs. I locked things away. I was good at it. So good that I started seeing everything as a potential threat that needed to be boxed in." He looked up at her. "I quit because I forgot how to look at something without wondering how to break it, or how to lock it. When I saw you on that floor, my first instinct was to lock the vault, to seal the breach." He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. "But when I grabbed you, I wasn't holding a key. I was holding you, and I was terrified. Not that the spire would fall. I was terrified that you would break." Seren watched him, her eyes wide. "You didn't touch me like a tool," she whispered. Because you're not, Rowan said fiercely. You are the person who held onto the carpet so the Empire wouldn't fall. You are the one who has been carrying the weight of that thing in the basement for 18 years without breaking. That isn't weak, Seren. That is the strongest thing I have ever seen. Seren's lip trembled. She squeezed his hand. But I can't keep doing it, Rowan. I'm tired. It drains me. Every day it takes a little more. Morrow is right. Eventually I will fade. And then the door opens. No, Rowan said. Morrow is an idiot. He thinks in straight lines. He thinks the only way to handle a load is to force it through a single wire. He stood up, his mind racing. The engineer was waking up again. What if we don't block the energy? Rowan muttered, pacing the small room. What if we don't try to shut it up? What do you mean? The vault wants to flow, Rowan said, gesturing with his hands. It's a current. Morrow tried to force that current through you like a lightning bolt through a needle. That's why it burns. But what if we expanded the circuit? What if we built a distribution grid? Seren sat up, wincing slightly. You want to rewire the palace. I want to rewire the connection, Rowan corrected. I want to take the load off you. Make you the conductor, not the wire. You guide the energy, but you don't carry it. Is that possible? Anything is possible, Rowan said, a small, crooked smile touching his lips. If you have enough duct tape and a complete lack of regard for building codes. For the first time since the explosion, Seren smiled back. It was real. I think we are out of duct tape, she said. Then we will steal some, Rowan said. But first we have to convince your mother not to execute me for treason. The strategy meeting took place in the archives, because Tamsin Quill refused to leave her books. Empress Calith stood by a dusty table, looking entirely out of place among the towering stacks of paper. Bex Rourke stood guard at the door. Rowan and Seren, who had insisted on coming sitting in a hoverchair, were at the table. Tamsin slammed a massive leather-bound tome onto the table. Dust motes danced in the air. The Crown Oath, Tamsin announced, adjusting her spectacles. Dated 300 years ago, signed by the First Empress and the architects of the vault. She flipped the pages with a clawed finger until she found a complex diagram. It says here, Tamsin read, that the vault is the heart of the state. But legal language is tricky. In Old Foxkin dialect, heart doesn't just mean the center. It means the burden. The text explicitly states, the burden shall be borne by the blood, but the key shall be held by the worthy. Meaning what? Bex asked from the door. Meaning Morrow has been lying about the law for 20 years, Tamsin said triumphantly. He claimed the Chancellor has the right of stewardship over the vault. But the oath says the key, the mechanism of opening, belongs to the worthy. It doesn't specify a title. It specifies a quality. That is poetic, Empress Calith said dryly. But poetry does not stop a coup. Morrow has allies in the High Court. They are already whispering that I am weak, that I allowed a human laborer to desecrate the holy site. They are saying Morrow was trying to save the spire from my incompetence. He is spinning the narrative, Rowan said. He wants a public trial. He wants to make this about human versus Foxkin, about tradition versus contamination. If he does that, the court will side with him just to protect their own status. Then we don't make it about that, Seren said. Her voice was stronger now. She looked at her mother. We make it about competence. Morrow failed. He broke the floor. He caused the surge. He endangered the spire. And you, Rowan added, looking at the Empress, need to show them the alternative. You need to show them a solution that actually works. Calith looked at Rowan. And you have this solution. Rowan pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was a napkin from the mess hall covered in sketches, drawn with a grease marker. It's rough, Rowan admitted. But it's solid. The vault is a biothermal reactor. It's trying to sync with Seren's biorhythm. The problem is the mismatch in frequency. The vault is oscillating at a gigahertz range. Seren is well humanish. Foxkin, Calith corrected automatically. Biological, Rowan amended. The point is the friction creates heat. That's what drains her. My plan is to install a series of harmonic dampeners in the subfloor of the nursery. We use crystalline resonance chambers, which you have plenty of in the chandeliers of the ballroom, by the way, to step down the vault's frequency before it hits Seren. He pointed to the napkin. It acts like a transformer. The vault gets to connect, Seren gets to control the flow, but the energy is dispersed into the spire's heating and lighting grid instead of burning her up. Bex stepped forward, peering at the napkin. You want to turn the princess into a thermostat. I want to turn her into a CPU, Rowan said. She processes the signal. The spire does the work. Calith stared at the napkin. You want to dismantle the ballroom chandeliers. They are tacky anyway, Tamsin muttered under her breath. It is a human solution, Calith said, her face unreadable. It is mechanical, functional. It lacks ceremony. With all due respect, Majesty, Rowan said, meeting her gaze. Ceremony is when you put your daughter in a hospital bed. Maybe it is time for some plumbing. The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the ventilation fans. Seren held her breath. No one spoke to the Empress like that. Calith looked at Rowan. Then she looked at Seren, who was watching Rowan with a look that Calith recognized from her own youth, a look of absolute terrifying trust. Bex, Calith said, if I authorize this renovation, can you secure the nursery? I can, Bex said. But the court will demand oversight. They will not let a human work on the vault alone. Then they can watch, Calith said. Schedule a hearing tomorrow morning. We will not hide this. We will do it in plain sight. She turned to Rowan. You will present this plan, and then you will execute it. But know this, Rowan Hale, if you fail, if you hurt her. I know, Rowan said. If I fail, I won't need you to execute me. The vault will do it for you. The next morning, the hearing was less of a trial and more of an interrogation. It was held in the Grand Council chamber, a circular room with tiered seating that rose 30 feet high. The seats were filled with the nobility of the Spire Foxkin, with sleek fur and sharp eyes whispering behind fans of silk and steel. Morrow was there, standing in a designated inquiry box. He had been cleaned up, but he was still in simple clothes. He stood tall, projecting an air of martyred dignity. Rowan stood in the center of the floor. He had finally been forced to change clothes. He wore a clean gray maintenance jumpsuit, but Bex had pinned a small insignia on his collar, a silver wrench. It was the symbol of the chief engineer, a position that hadn't been filled in 50 years. This is absurd, Morrow announced, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics. We are listening to a janitor, a man who spends his days scrubbing waste pipes. He proposes to tinker with the sacred heart of our civilization. I propose to fix a leak, Rowan said, his voice steady. He didn't look at the nobles. He looked at the holographic projection of the vault schematics floating in the center of the room. The vault is leaking radiation. It has been for decades. That is why the spire drifts. That is why the atmospheric stabilizers are failing. You call it the slumber, but it's just inefficient. He speaks of the vault as a machine, a noble shouted from the third tier. It is a divine gift. It is a machine, Rowan said louder, and right now it is a broken one. And you think you can tame it, Morrow sneered. Where I failed, will you succeed, because you have what empathy? Because I have a screwdriver, Rowan said, and I know how to use it, Morrow laughed. Majesty, he said, turning to the Empress who sat on the high throne. This is a farce. He is stalling. Look at the princess. She is weak. She can barely sit up. He is giving her false hope. When this fails and the vault opens, you will beg me to step in and control it. Seren sat beside her mother. She was pale, yes, but she sat upright. I am not weak, Saren said. Her voice was not loud, but the room went quiet to hear it. I was carrying the weight of the spire while you were playing politics, Chancellor. I was holding the door shut. And you cannot hold it much longer, Morrow said softly. It is simple biology, child. You are the weakest. She is not weak, the shout came from the security box. Bex Rourke stepped forward. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white. I have watched this man, Bex said, pointing at Rowan. I watched him walk into a room filled with armed guards with nothing but a roll of tape. I watched him disable a Class A energy surge with a cleaning canister. You call him a janitor like it is an insult. But in this spire, when the lights go out, who do you call? When the air stops flowing, who do you pray to? Bex looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the nobles. He is maintenance, Bex declared. He fixes what you pretend isn't broken. And right now, this court is broken. Our honor is broken. We let a child suffer because we were too proud to admit we didn't understand the technology we live on. She turned to Morrow. You want to talk about protecting the Empire? He saved the air. You tried to sacrifice her. A murmur ran through the crowd. The human versus Foxkin narrative was crumbling. Bex, a war hero, a pure-blooded Foxkin, was vouching for the human. It changed the equation. Rowan stepped forward. He looked up at the Empress. I need access to the sublevels, Rowan said. I need a team of technicians, humans, and Foxkin. I don't care as long as they can weld. And I need the princess. The princess? Calith asked. I need her to calibrate the system, Rowan said. He looked at Seren. She is the only one who can hear the music. I just built the instrument. She has to tune it. Morrow slammed his hand on the railing of his box. This is madness. If she connects to the vault while he is tampering with the dampeners, a single surge will stop her heart. He is gambling with her life. Rowan looked at Morrow. I'm not gambling. I'm an engineer. There is a difference. And if you are wrong, Calith asked. Her voice was steel, but her eyes were pleading. Then I die first, Rowan said. I will be in the conduit with her. If the surge hits me before it reaches her. Seren stood up. She walked down the steps of the dais. She moved slowly, but steadily. She walked until she stood next to Rowan. She took his hand, in front of the entire court. I trust him, Seren said. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 10 seconds that would decide the fate of the spire. Empress Calith stood. The inquiry is suspended, she announced. The chief engineer is granted full access to the Ember Vault. The Royal Guard will oversee the operation. She looked at Morrow. And Chancellor Morrow will remain in the gallery to watch, Calith said coldly. I want him to see it. I want him to see that he was not replaced by a better politician. He was replaced by a better man. Morrow went pale. For a narcissist, being irrelevant was worse than being executed. You are making a mistake, Morrow screamed, as the guards moved him back. The floor will eat him. It will eat you all. Rowan ignored him. He turned to Seren. Ready to go to work? He asked. Seren squeezed his hand. Her palm was sweating, but her grip was firm. I have my work boots on, she said, lifting the hem of her gown to reveal a pair of heavy, practical boots maintenance issue. Rowan smiled. It was the first time he had truly smiled in days. Let's go fix the floor, he said. The work began immediately. It was not a montage of magic. It was grueling, sweaty, dirty work. Rowan led a team of 20 technicians, humans, who looked terrified to be in the royal sector, and Foxkin engineers, who looked insulted for taking orders from a human. But Rowan didn't have time for egos. That weld is sloppy, he barked at a Foxkin noble who was holding a plasma torch. Do it again. If that seam bursts, the princess gets a migraine. Do you want to give the princess a migraine? No, Chief, the Foxkin muttered, reigniting the torch. They worked for 12 hours straight. They stripped the subfloor of the nursery. They installed the crystalline dampeners, shimmering prisms, harvested from the ballroom chandeliers, now repurposed as energy sinks. They ran miles of coolant piping. Seren sat in the center of the chaos on a stool, drinking nutrient shakes and watching. Every hour, Rowan would come to her with a sensor. "What do you hear?" he would ask. "It is humming," Seren would say, closing her eyes. "High pitch, like a mosquito." "Okay, that's the upper harmonic," Rowan would mutter, making a note. "We need to widen the aperture on Bank 3. It was intimate. It was technical. It was the most romantic thing Seren had ever experienced. He wasn't reciting poetry. He was calibrating the world to fit her. By the 18th hour, they were ready. The floor had been resealed. The heavy stone was gone, replaced by a lattice of transparent, reinforced glass, beneath which the dampeners glowed with a soft blue light. The court gathered in the viewing gallery behind the blast shields. Morrow was there watching with hateful intensity. Rowan stood in the center of the glass floor. He held a large switch, the master breaker for the new circuit. "Okay," Rowan said into his headset. "Grid is live. Coolant is flowing. Seren." Seren stepped onto the glass. She wasn't wearing robes. She was wearing a simple flight suit Rowan had found for her. She stood opposite him. "I am here," she said. "When I throw this switch," Rowan said, his voice low, so only she could hear, "the vault is going to try to rush you. But the crystals should catch it. You just need to stand your ground. Don't pull. Just be." "Just be," Seren repeated. "On 3, Rowan said. 1, 2, 3. He threw the switch. A deep thrum shook the room. Beneath the glass, the blue light turned a brilliant, blinding white. The energy of the vault surged up, hungry and violent. Morrow leaned forward against the glass of the viewing deck, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the scream. The energy hit the dampeners. It didn't explode. It sang. The crystals caught the raw power and refracted it. The harsh, jagged lightning of the vault was split into 1,000 soft, harmonious waves. The light spread out through the floor, lighting up the room with a golden dawn-like glow. Seren gasped. She didn't fall. She stood straighter. Her hair floated slightly in the static charge. Her skin flushed with color. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "It doesn't hurt," she whispered. Her voice was amplified by the room's acoustics. "It feels warm." Rowan watched the readouts on his handheld. Load distribution at 100%. Core temperature stable. Spire altitude is increasing. He looked up. "We are rising." The spire, freed from the energy drag of the malfunctioning seal, was buoyancy correcting. It was floating higher, smoother. In the viewing gallery, the nobles gasped. They could feel it. The constant, subtle vibration that had plagued the spire for years, the shudder of a struggling engine, was gone. The floor was still. Bex Rourke let out a breath she had been holding for 2 days. Empress Calith put a hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. Morrow stared. He stared at the girl, standing in the light, strong and radiant. He stared at the human janitor, checking his gauges. "Impossible," Morrow whispered. "It is impossible." "It is physics," Tamsin Quill said, standing next to him looking smug. "And a little bit of love, but mostly physics." On the floor, Rowan looked at Seren. "How is it?" he asked. Seren opened her eyes. They were glowing, but it wasn't scary. It was beautiful. "It is quiet," she said. The screaming stopped. She took a step toward him. "Rowan," she said, "I can hear the whole spire. I can feel the engines. I can feel the wind. It is all connected." "You are the CPU now," Rowan grinned tiredly. "Don't crash on us," Seren laughed. She reached out and grabbed him by the front of his jumpsuit. She pulled him onto the central focal point with her. "Hey," Rowan said, alarmed. "I'm not grounded for this voltage." "I am," Seren said. She kissed him. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss. It was electric, literally. Rowan felt a jolt of static snap against his lips, tasting of ozone, and ancient power. But beneath the shock, it was just her. The girl who slept on the floor. The girl who didn't want to be a tool. The court erupted in scandalized whispers and shocked gasps, but neither of them cared. Rowan broke the kiss breathless. "You are going to get me fired," he said. "I am the princess," Seren said, her eyes dancing. "I will hire you back." Up in the gallery, Empress Calith watched them. She saw the way the light curved around them, protecting them. She saw the way the spire held steady. She turned to the guards, holding Morrow. "Take him to the airlock," Calith said. "Just kidding. Take him to the deepest dungeon we have. I want him to live a long, long time, knowing that he was beaten by a janitor." Morrow was dragged away screaming about improved efficiency ratings, but no one was listening. Rowan looked at the readout one last time. "System stable," he announced. He looked at Seren. "Job's done," he said. "For now." "Not yet," Seren said, holding his hand tight. "Now we have to keep it running." "That is the thing about maintenance," Rowan said, looking at the golden light swirling around them. "It never really ends." But for the first time in his life looking at her, he didn't mind the overtime. The tribunal of the Crown Oath was not held in the public amphitheater, nor in the opulent ballroom where the Foxkin usually displayed their power. It was convened in the deep chamber, a circular room carved directly into the spire's primary keel, surrounded by the humming machinery that kept the city aloft. It was fitting Empress Calith decided to hold judgment in the belly of the beast. The room was stark. The walls were unadorned titanium. The lighting was harsh and industrial. 50 high-ranking nobles sat on elevated benches, looking uncomfortable in the utilitarian setting. In the center of the room, standing on a simple metal grate, was Chancellor Morrow Sable. He looked diminished without his robes of office, yet he held his chin high. He was a creature of politics, and he knew that even a scaffold could be a stage if one played the part of the martyr well enough. "The charge is treason," Empress Calith said. Her voice was amplified by the room's acoustics, stripped of all warmth. "You attempted to usurp the Crown's authority over the Ember Vault. You endangered the air. You utilized forbidden technology." "I attempted to save a dying empire," Morrow replied, his voice smooth, projecting to the back rows. "We are a sky-dwelling people, Majesty, yet we are ruled by fear of the ground. The vault is our birthright. It is power, infinite power, and you have let it sleep for a century because you lack the will to wake it." He turned to the nobles, spreading his bound hands. "And why does it sleep?" Morrow asked, his gaze landing on the empty chair next to the Empress Seren's chair. "Because the keeper is weak, because the vessel is cracked. I tried to force the lock because the key was too rusted to turn." A murmur went through the crowd. Morrow was good. He was tapping into their secret fears that the Foxkin were fading, that their decadence had made them vulnerable. "The princess is not here to defend herself," Morrow added with a sneer. "Likely she is back in her bed recovering from the effort of simply standing up yesterday. Is this the future you want? An empress who faints at a loud noise." "The princess is busy," said a voice from the shadows of the maintenance alcove. The heavy blast door groaned open. Rowan Hale walked out. He was clean finally, but he still wore the gray jumpsuit of the maintenance corps. He held a data slate in one hand and a heavy, greasy wrench in the other. "She is busy fixing the mess you made," Rowan said. Morrow laughed. "The janitor returns. Tell me, Mr. Hale, have you come to mop up the legal proceedings?" "I am here to present evidence," Rowan said. He walked past Morrow, ignoring him, and stopped before the Empress. "Majesty, the stabilizers we installed yesterday are holding. But to make the fix permanent, we had to go deeper. We had to access the core logs, the vault's history." Rowan plugged his slate into the central console. A holographic projection sprang to life in the center of the room. It wasn't a map, it was a graph. A jagged, violent red line that spanned 20 years. This is the vault's energy output for the last 2 decades, Rowan explained. You see these spikes, these red peaks, that is the vault trying to breach containment. It is a predatory energy source. It wants to expand. It wants to consume the spire's grid. Rowan pointed to a second line, a thin, steady golden line that ran directly underneath the red chaos, mirroring it perfectly, pushing back against every spike. And this, Rowan said quietly, this is the counterpressure. This is the containment field. The automatic dampeners, a noble called out. The ancient shields. No, Rowan said. The dampeners are mechanical. They flatline. This line fluctuates. It reacts. It anticipates. He looked at Morrow. This isn't a shield, Rowan said. It is a heartbeat. The room went deadly silent. What are you saying? Calith whispered, leaning forward. I am saying Seren wasn't sick, Rowan said. And she wasn't weak. The vault didn't drain her because she was a bad battery. It drained her because she has been wrestling it for 18 years. Rowan turned the graph to face the court. She is a living seal, Rowan declared. Since she was a child, she has been unconsciously feeding her own bioenergy into the grid to keep the vault from exploding. Every time she fainted, every time she slept for 20 hours, it wasn't a weakness. It was exhausting. She has been holding up the sky with her bare hands since she was born. Morrow's face went slack. That is impossible. She is a child. No mind could sustain that load. A selfish mind couldn't, Rowan shot back. But she doesn't know how to be selfish. That is why the vault couldn't break her. It couldn't find a crack in her ego, because she didn't have one. Rowan looked at the screen where the golden line held firm against the red tide. You called her the weakest child, Rowan, said his voice hard. But she is the only reason you aren't all falling into the clouds right now. While the court stared at the hologram in stunned silence, Seren Viren was 300 feet below them, standing at the edge of the abyss. The true entrance to the Ember Vault was not in the nursery. That was just a remote terminal. The true entrance was here at the very bottom of the spire's keel, in a spherical chamber, where the gravity generators hummed. In the center of the room was a pit, and in the pit was the core. It looked like a miniature sun trapped in a cage of spinning magnetic rings. It roared silently, a chaotic storm of amber fire. Seren stood on the gantry, overlooking the core. She wore the flight suit Rowan had given her. It was too big in the shoulders, but she liked the weight of it. It felt like armor. She gripped the railing. The heat was intense, even through the thermal shielding. For her whole life, this heat had been her enemy. It was the monster in her nightmares, the leech, that sucked the color from her cheeks and the strength from her legs. But now, looking at it with clear eyes, she didn't feel fear. She felt recognition. I know you, she whispered. The core flared a tongue of fire licking against the containment field. I know you, the vibration answered. It wasn't a voice. It resonated in her bones. Serene closed her eyes. Memories washed over her. Not visual memories, but sensory ones. The feeling of being 4 years old, crying in her bed because the floor felt too loud. The feeling of being 10, collapsing at a garden party because the core had surged, and she had instinctively thrown her spirit in the way to catch it. She saw herself through the vault's perspective. To the vault, she wasn't a princess. She was an obstacle. She was a stubborn, unyielding wall of soft light that refused to let the fire burn the world. I wasn't dying, Seren realized, tears pricking her eyes. I was fighting. She opened her eyes. She looked at her hands. They were trembling not from weakness, but from the sheer magnitude of the truth. She had spent her life apologizing for being a burden. She had let Morrow pity her. She had let the court ignore her. She had believed them. Never again, she said. The door behind her hissed open. Rowan walked onto the gantry. He looked tired. The trial had taken a toll on him, but when he saw her, his expression softened into that familiar, steady warmth. How did it go? Seren asked, not turning around. Morrow is trying to argue that the graph is a forgery, Rowan said, joining her at the railing. But Tamsin found the original medical logs to corroborate it. He is done, Seren. It doesn't matter if he is done, Seren said, looking at the core. This isn't. Rowan looked down at the angry swirl of energy. The dampeners we installed upstairs are helping. The load on you is down by 40%. It is not enough, Seren said. As long as I am the only seal, I am still a prisoner. I can't leave the spire, Rowan. If I go too far, the connection stretches. If it snaps. It won't snap, Rowan said. Because we are going to change the architecture. He set his tool bag down on the metal grating. He pulled out a device that looked like a complex geometric puzzle made of crystal and copper. What is that? Seren asked. I call it the handshake protocol, Rowan said, grinning slightly. Humanity fuck yeah engineering at its finest. He knelt and began connecting the device to the main control terminal of the gravity drive. The problem, Rowan explained, as he worked his hands moving with practiced speed, is that the vault thinks it owns you. It thinks you are a dedicated peripheral, a singular seal. So we are going to introduce it to the concept of a network. He pointed to the massive titanium struts that held the spire together. The spire is alive in a way, Rowan said. It has sensors, structural stress monitors, and energy grids. It has a nervous system. I am rewriting the containment code to route the vault's pressure, not just through you, but through every single beam bolt and plate in this city. He looked up at her. We are going to distribute the load, he said. Instead of you holding the door alone, we are going to make the entire spire hold the door with you. You become the command signal, not the physical barrier. But the vault has to agree to the new interface, Seren said. It is sentient, Rowan. It is stubborn. That is why you are here, Rowan said. He stood up and offered her his hand. You have to tell it the new rules. And if it refuses, then we threaten to turn off the lights, Rowan deadpanned. Trust me, machines hate being turned off. Seren took a deep breath. She took his hand. Okay, she said. Let's negotiate. Rowan activated the device. A pulse of blue light shot from the terminal, racing down the cables and into the magnetic cage of the core. The core roared. The amber fire turned a violent crimson. The spire shook. Rejection. The vibration screamed. The seal is mine. Seren flinched, her knees buckling under the psychic blow. Rowan caught her. He didn't pull her away. He held her steady. Stand your ground, Rowan shouted over the roar. You aren't the weakest anymore. Remember, you are the boss. Seren grit her teeth. She planted her feet. She didn't push the energy away this time. She reached out with her mind and grabbed it. No, she projected back. I am not yours. The core raged, slamming against her mental defenses. I require a host, the vault thundered. I consume. You don't consume, Seren said aloud, her voice gaining strength. You serve. She stepped closer to the edge. She raised her hand and pressed it against the thermal glass. I am Seren Varen, she declared. I am the blood that keeps you warm. I am the breath that keeps you burning. I have given you 18 years of my life. You have taken enough. She visualized the spire, not as a palace but as a home. She visualized the thousands of people living in it, the foxkin in their towers, the humans in the maintenance tunnels. She visualized the steel, the glass, the stone. Share the weight, she commanded. She forced the connection open. She took the crushing weight of the vault that was resting on her shoulders, and she threw it outward. Connect. The vault resisted. It tried to cling to her. But Rowan was there. He was typing furiously on the terminal, overriding the safety lockouts, forcing the mechanical bridges to engage. Come on, you stubborn ball of gas, Rowan muttered. Link up. He slammed the final command key. Network error cleared. System integration. Active. The sensation was instantaneous. Seren felt the weight vanish. It didn't disappear. It dispersed. She felt the heavy groan of the titanium keel as it took the load. She felt the vibration hum through the deck plates of the lower levels. She felt the entire city stiffen, brace, and then hold. The core's color shifted. The angry crimson faded. The violent amber softened. It settled into a deep, steady gold. Accepted, the vibration hummed. It sounded grudging but respectful. Host designation administrator. Seren sagged against the railing, gasping for air. But this time, the air filled her lungs. It was sweet. It was full. She wasn't empty. She was just herself. Rowan was at her side in a second. Seren, you okay? Seren looked up at him. She was sweating, her hair plastered to her forehead, but her eyes were shining brighter than the core. I can feel my toes, she said, laughing breathlessly. Rowan, I can feel my toes, Rowan laughed. He pulled her into a hug, lifting her feet off the grate. That is usually a standard feature, princess. It is distributed, Seren said into his shoulder, her voice muffled but joyful. The spire is carrying it. We did it. You did it, Rowan said, setting her down, but keeping his arms around her. I just ran the cables. You provided the will. They stood there for a moment in the humming silence of the engine room, the golden light of the tamed sun bathing them in warmth. We should go back up, Rowan said reluctantly. Your mother is probably pacing a hole in the floor. Let her pace, Seren said. She rested her forehead against his chest. I just want to stand here for a minute, without falling down. Take your time, Rowan said softly. I'm not going anywhere. The final judgment of Morrow Sable was delivered the next morning. Empress Calith sat on her throne in the grand ballroom, the heavy velvet curtains pulled back to reveal the morning sun. The storm had broken completely. The sky was a piercing, impossible blue. Morrow stood before the throne. He was not defiant anymore. He looked small. The revelation of the living seal had stripped him of his political armor. He wasn't the visionary who tried to save the empire. He was the parasite who tried to kill its savior. Morrow Sable, Calith said. Her voice was calm. She didn't need to shout. The truth shouted for her. You claimed that the Foxkin were weak. You claimed that we needed to consume the world to survive. You were wrong. She gestured to Seren, who stood at her right hand. Seren wore a dress of simple blue silk, no heavy jewels, no crown. She didn't need them. She stood tall, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. My daughter has secured the vault, Calith announced. Not by force, but by cooperation. She has integrated power into the very structure of our home. Calith leaned forward. You sought to rule by fear, she said. But fear is a poor foundation. It cracks. What will you do with me? Morrow asked, his voice hollow. Execution. That will only make me a martyr. I am not going to execute you, Calith said. That would imply you are dangerous. You are not dangerous, Morrow. You are obsolete, she signaled the guards. You are stripped of all titles. You are stripped of your name. You will be escorted to the surface settlement of Iron Root. You will work in the reclamation fields. You will learn what it means to build something with your hands instead of stealing it with your words. Morrow looked horrified. The surface with the dirt. It is honest work, Calith said. Perhaps it will cleanse your soul. If not, at least you will be useful. Take him away, she ordered. As the guards dragged a sputtering Morrow from the hall, the court did not bow to him. They did not whisper. They simply turned their backs. Calith stood. She looked out at the assembly nobles' guards, and for the first time, a delegation of human technicians, standing in the back, invited by royal decree. We have lived in a spire divided, Calith said. We looked up at the stars and forgot who kept the floor beneath our feet. She unrolled a scroll of parchment. Today, I issue the decree of unity. From this day forward, the distinction between high blood and base labor is abolished. Citizenship in the Amber Crown Spire is granted not by birth but by contribution. Those who maintain the spire are the spire. She looked directly at the group of technicians in the back. "You are no longer invisible," the Empress said. A cheer went up. It started small from the humans, but then the royal guard joined in, banging their spears against their shields. Then slowly, the nobles began to clap. Seren looked at Rowan, who was standing with his crew. He wasn't cheering. He was smiling, that small, dry smile of his. He gave her a subtle nod. "We fixed it," the nod said. Later that evening, the spire was celebrating. Fireworks exploded over the city, their light reflecting off the glass towers. Seren escaped the party. She climbed the maintenance ladder to the highest observation deck, a small platform on the very tip of the spire, known only to the wind and the cleaning crews. Rowan was there. He was sitting on the edge, his legs dangling over the 3,000-foot drop, eating a sandwich. "You are missing the canapes," Seren said, sitting down beside him. Rowan swallowed. "I prefer ham and cheese, less likely to have secret political messages hidden in the garnish." Seren laughed. It was a full, deep sound. It felt good to laugh. "My mother wants to make you the royal architect," Seren said. "She wants you to redesign the East Wing." "Pass," Rowan said. "I'm happy to be chief engineer. Less velvet, more grease." He looked at her. The wind whipped her hair around her face. She looked vibrant. The pallor was gone from her skin, replaced by a healthy flush. "You look good," he said. "I feel good," Seren said. She looked out at the horizon where the twin moons were rising. "I feel quiet. For the first time in my life, there is no noise in my head." She turned to him. "Thank you, Rowan." "I just kicked the regulator," Rowan shrugged. "Stop it," Seren said gently. "Stop pretending you are just a mechanic." "I am just a mechanic," Rowan insisted. "I fix things. That is who I am." "And what happens when everything is fixed?" Seren asked. Rowan looked at her. He looked at the city below them, glowing with light that was now stable, safe, and shared. "Then I maintain it," he said. Seren shifted closer to him. Their shoulders touched. It was a simple contact, but it felt electric in a good way. "I don't have a title anymore," Seren said. "I mean, I am still princess, but the weakest child thing doesn't fit." "I never liked that title anyway," Rowan said. "I prefer the anchor." The anchor," Seren tested the word. "I like that." She looked down at his hands, the scarred, capable hands that had rewired a legend. "Rowan," she said softly, "I can't order you to stay. The new laws allow you to be a free citizen. You could go anywhere. You could go to the surface. You could find a ship." Rowan looked at her. He saw the question in her eyes, the fear that now that the crisis was over, the hero would walk into the sunset. "I'm not going to the surface," Rowan said. "Too much dust." "And a ship, cramped living quarters," Rowan dismissed. "So," Seren asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Stay." It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. Rowan reached out and took her hand. He interlaced his fingers with hers. "I'm good at staying," Rowan said, looking into her amber eyes. "I fixed that," Seren leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat there, two specks on top of a floating mountain, watching the galaxy turn above them. "You know," Rowan said after a while, breaking the silence. "Technically, as chief engineer, I outrank the head of palace security in matters of structural safety. I could order Bex to bring us better sandwiches." "Don't push your luck, Hale," Seren chuckled. "Right, noted." They fell silent again, content. Below them in the archives, Tamsin Quill was updating the official history of the Spire. She dipped her quill into the inkpot and wrote the final entry for the Era of Silence. She paused, looked at the sensor readings that showed the vault purring like a contented cat, and then looked at the footage of the trial, where a girl in a maintenance suit had stared down a son. Tamsin smirked, shook her head, and muttered to the empty room. "So the weakest child was holding the Empire up. Classic." High above, on the roof of the world, Seren laughed. And for the first time in 18 years, It didn't hurt at all.